And Ed, being the both visionary and shrewd negotiator that he is, saw it and said, you know, I think we can do something with this. I'm very, very privileged to have built a career transacting, buying and selling very, very important and significant historical cars. Primarily specializing in Ferraris, significant European sports cars, whether they be, Italian, German, or British. And that's what the Cultivated Collector was founded upon. That was what I was exposed to in my first internship. There's a certain spirit that a lot of these cars carry, for better or for worse, a bit of nose in the air, kind of whiff of superiority type of thing that comes with a 7 or 8 figure vehicle. That's what I focused on in my career. That's what I dedicated my professional life to. I shouldn't be speaking in past tense because I'm still dedicated to those things. But the single biggest change that's happened has been that over the past 3 years, I really embraced Lamborghini, specifically Diablos. The mirrors have been investment grade and acceptable, cars that are accepted by serious collectors for a very long time. Dealt mirrors previously. I dealt periscope Countachs, stuff like that previously. That was all a given and all very good, very special examples. I had a very well-known car that was the Barn Find Mira, thin chassis car that had been in an Illinois garage for close to 40 years. Through my friend John Tamarian, John had always talked about Diablos. And look, as a kid, I'd always loved Diablos. But it wasn't something that I'd ever allowed myself to enjoy or participate in. It wasn't something I allowed myself to go toward. And then John kind of always talked about them and was very, very passionate about them, remains very passionate about them. I started to come around, and then that culminated in me buying a Diablo SE30 for my personal collection about 3 years ago. USA car, purple white, a very well-known car, very good car. That sent me down a rabbit hole as I began to understand and experience the cars and realize just how rare they actually are. When you really start to break down the cars, they're legitimately rare. They're not rare by modern car standards. No, they're rare. They're actually rare, especially when you start to look at all the special models. They're genuinely rare and genuinely special. I started diving into the world, and in the last year and a half, I've had an excess of 20 Diablos pass through my hands. It's a car that I've really, really become passionate about, and you can see a genuinely special car. I mean, driving a Diablo is an inherently special experience. I'm not trying to trivialize what driving most Ferraris of that era are like, but there's just a certain feel. I could take you for an hour and try and describe it, and it would be a waste of everyone's time. But just take my word for it, it feels special. When I started to pursue Diablos from a business perspective, when I started to seek out Diablos, I did what I do with Cultivated, which is I seek the best ones. I immediately try and zero in on the best, the most significant examples that there are. This is happening at the same time that my friendship with Ed Bullion is growing, and very privileged to count Ed as a friend. But I would say that the kind of car that Ed values and the kind of car that I generally focus on with Cultivated are two somewhat different things. And so at the outset, I wouldn't have expected Ed to become a client of the Cultivated Collector. I buy a lot of cars in Japan. It's pretty well established, well known. I come across the wildest, wackiest Diablo SV that I've seen in a long time. So I'll start with this. The underlying car, great color. On a Diablo SV, red is pretty unusual on a Diablo SV. And I actually think it looks very good on the car. But It was a car that was very Anija style, which is to say, lights, rhinestones, big wheels, crazy wing, crazy exhaust. Very, very Japanese style. Not what you're looking at when you're looking for something that is a top example. But the underlying car was good. And so I find this thing and I see it and I show it to Ed. And Ed, being the both visionary and shrewd negotiator that he is, saw it and said, I think we can do something with this. And after having a bit of a conversation and getting a plan together, I said, man, I think you're right. We purchased this Diablo SV. And it shows up a few months later, and it is glorious in its just ridiculous Japanness. But fortunately, through a mutual friend of ours, we tracked down all the requisite parts to bring it back to being a stock Diablo SV, which Ed then undertook a recommissioning of the car to stock form. And I mean, to say it's a transformation really undersells it. I mean, the car looks awesome. It's really cool. The color's fantastic. Ed looked for the closest match possible to Verde Scandal. Got very, very close, I might add. The end product is a very fun, very cool car that I might almost say is too good for Ed. What's been really rewarding for me is Ed has driven other Diablos, experienced other Diablos, but I'd become really passionate about Diablos in the time since, and I kept saying to Ed, dude, I think you're gonna fit, and I really think you're gonna like this car. It really warms my heart that after having driven it from Los Angeles to Vegas, that went off without a hitch, he fit in the car, loved the car, and it also goes to show something about these cars, which is something that I think that people wildly misunderstand. I think that the internet has done Diablos a huge disservice in this regard, which is that a Diablo, when sorted, is actually a highly usable car. It's not a crazy complex car. Unfortunately, there's some guys out there who will make it into something, build it up into some crazy thing that costs unconscionable amounts of money to maintain and to work on and all this. And it's just unnecessary. It's just not true. I'm not saying Diablo is cheap. We're not saying it's like maintaining a Corolla, but it's not this crazy monster by any stretch of the imagination. And a good sorted Diablo is a car that you can really drive. You can really use. Man, to have that experience, it's like to have that experience just using it. Like I've been using my SE30 for the past couple of months, and there really aren't too many cars that one can buy at any price that are as much of a rolling event as a Diablo. A Diablo is an event on wheels. But by the same token, it is very usable. It is still such a visceral and raw car that you still feel far more connected with the car, with the machine. The experience is much more engaging and visceral and exciting, in my opinion, than cars that came later. But it has more usability than a Countach, which admittedly, I love a Countach. I love a downdraft Countach. I love a Stick Mercy. They're all great cars. To me, a Diablo it's Baby Bear. One's Papa Bear, one's Mama Bear, this is Baby Bear. It's still wild. It's still a real Lamborghini. It's still a true Lamborghini. Nothing against the Audi cars, but a Diablo is still a true Lamborghini, but it has just enough refinement in it to make it something that is a car that you can really use. I'm not saying a Countach is not something that you can use, but if you're someone who's like, even I'm a little bit tight in a Countach, let alone a guy like Ed, a Diablo you can fit in. A Diablo is a pretty easy, coherent thing to drive and use. Because of that, I still think that all mid-engine V12 Lamborghinis represent a ton of value. Even in the current market, I still think they represent a ton of value. When you look at their production numbers, how significant they are, how iconic they are, when you actually do a Doug DeMuro style market cap analysis, I still think all of them are really undervalued. But to me, the Diablo is the sweet spot. It is the most undervalued. And that's why I love them. And I am grateful to Ed for embarking on a journey together. I feel privileged to have had the cars that I have. And it's been a lot of fun helping a lot of clients realize the dreams that they've had for Diablos. To see people kind of come out of their shells and discover, oh my God, this is a really significant car. This is a super cool car. This is a wild car. I mean, I've sold cars to guys who I would have never expected a year ago. I would have never expected a person who I just sold a car to buy a Diablo. But they're in it. They're into it. And once they're in that car, I can't pry that thing back out of their hands again. And it's a real testament to just how wonderful and engaging and charismatic the cars are.
When you get a ticket, it might look something like this, but the first thing that you need to do is take a picture of that ticket and send it to 305-305. That will get the ticket clinic on your case immediately. They've got brick and mortar offices in Georgia, Florida, and California, but they can help you find a ticket no matter where you get it in the United States by helping you find a local attorney that will do everything they can to help you avoid costly fines, insurance premium increases, points on your license, risk of suspension, even jail time. They've helped me out with this ticket and many others, and a lot of my friends as well. So check them out now at the link in the description below, or again, text your ticket to 305-305 to get the ticket clinic on your case. They are the perfect partner in your fight against any speeding ticket.